Hello, all. Welcome back to 100 Days of Magic. We are on the magical day 42 of our epic adventure, talking about all the tips and tricks that you can use to unlock the magic within you. My name is I am the host for these magical 100-day events, and I am the organizer of the space where these are being broadcast, the Crossroads of Magic and Mastery, a place where you can share your passion with other like-minded souls. That means if you happen to be a content creator, sharing your blog posts, your book reviews, your book announcements, your teleconferences, your classes that are upcoming, anything else that you are doing to create a more magical world. Or if you just love all of these things, then come and support the people who are working to create them, as well as talking to one another about what inspires you the most. What makes you feel jazzed? What makes you feel like life has a little extra spark as you work through your days? Hello, Boris. Hello, Jackie. We are working through spells for focus on the next few days. I figured this is a great transition from what we were just working on for spells of discernment. Focus is another one of those self-development kind of spells, but it's also a natural complement to discernment. So my thanks to Anita for suggesting it. We will be developing a spell for focus for Anita. Anita's spell for focus, however you want to think about it. So I'm glad you are all here to explore what this is going to look like. But just like we started before, we got to talk about what focus is. We talked about what discernment is. It is the natural result of plugging into spirit and helping spirit make the decisions while your mind is collecting the information. So the closer you plug into spirit, the easier it becomes to at least choose between the paths laid before you, which ones bring you closer to spirit, which ones bring you closer to your soul purpose, or even if it's not that just grand, which one you feel called to do, which one would give you the most pleasure. All right, focus is another kind of mental thing, but whereas discernment requires plugging into spirit, focus is something that happens as a result from becoming present in the moment. It's like taking this vast universal consciousness that we have and squishing it down to look at one thing. So anybody who's familiar with photography and knows how a camera lens works, focus is what you do when you turn the camera so you're looking on one distinct thing here or there, and it makes the aperture in the camera really small. So it's a contraction of mental energy that's held there for an extended period of time. The implications of focus are profound. Social scientists have done lots of studies on what gives us the ability to focus. It is one of those mental tricks that we can develop and we can build on in order to, it's like a muscle that we can develop in order to be able to hold our focus longer. But it also requires a certain amount of energy to stay focused. And the more you draw on your need to focus, the more energy you're using up, and eventually it's going to fizzle out. We all know what this feels like. We've all gone to school. So if you can remember the feeling of, taking a math test or taking like a standardized test like the SATs or something, when you had to sit for a long period of time, like 3 or 4 hours, and do one really concentrated, heavy mental exercise. You walked out of it and you're like, oh, I am so tired. And you just feel like you're not even like in alignment with yourself anymore. That's the energy drain that focus creates. We can use it for like limited periods of time, just like self-discipline. So now that I've said all of these things about what focus is, it's a contraction of energy and holding it in place, and a contraction of attention, but it uses up energy in the process. Now that we've defined it for ourselves, we can begin to suss out what planets might help us most in our pursuit of focus. Remember, Western magic is built around planets. It's like there are 7 crayons in the cosmic coloring box, and everything that we wish for in our world is colored in some general way from these 7 crayons. In Hermetic philosophy, they call them the 7 governors. The Christian church made them the 7 archangels. Archangel and archetype are basically the same concept, except archangel is an overarching spirit and an archetype is an overarching shape of something. So it doesn't matter if you call the planets spirits, angels, or archetypes. You're getting to the same heart of the matter. So everything in Western magic is tapping into one of those, as Alice Bailey would have called it, the 7 rays of manifestation. If you're wondering, I always hear this in my head, but what about Pluto? But what about Neptune? Can we not use magic with those two? Sure, you can. But they were discovered long after the Western esoteric magical tradition took form over thousands of years. And so I personally think of them as like extra spices that you can use. They're not in the main line of the language of magic. Anyway, so back to who would we use? All right, well, we use the sun for discernment because it's big and bright and it helps us to see. So, it helps us to see, so that's a possibility. Mercury you might think about, but Mercury goes here, there, and everywhere. Mercury is actually the planet of the ADD planet, the scattered attention planet. He doesn't really focus on things for very long. He's too flighty. All right, so what about Venus? Well, Venus desires things. If you are obsessed over the object of your intention, that is a certain kind of focus. So maybe it's a possibility. Mars is energy. So we talked about energy is needed for focus. So maybe. Jupiter. Jupiter's concept of focus is I want everything. I want to connect to all that is. And so Jupiter's concept of focus is to go to the smorgasbord and put so much of everything on your plate you can't possibly eat it all, which may not exactly be what you're looking for in the sense of focus. What do we have left? We have the moon. What about the moon in focus? Well, moon in some ways is the antithesis of focus. Moon helps us to relax and to chill and to just sort of be and sleep and dream. And so maybe not the best ally for focus, maybe for recovering from focus. So we have Saturn left. And you might not think of it this way, but Saturn is the first one we go to in terms of wanting to focus on things, because Saturn rules contraction. And in the case of focus, yes, he gets some help from Mars to provide the energy for the focus, and he is working on focusing what Mercury's doing in the case of mental focus. You might be able to sustain it a little longer if you get some Venus in there as an undercurrent, because what you love, you will focus on longer with less effort. So back in the day when the astrological model was being developed and fleshed out, I remember listening to a lecture by Robert Schmidt, who was talking about the metaphor for a chart is like a Greek trireme. That's the way the Greeks used to think about all the different elements and what the different planets meant to one another. And he would say that Saturn in the Greek trireme is, well, Mars is the guy who rows the boat with the oars, the constant manual energy. Saturn's the guy with the whip that cracks over the rowers to make sure they continue to row. And Venus is the one with the pipe that is playing a merry tune so that the rowers row in time without the guy with the whip having to whip them so much. So there's an interesting relationship between Saturn and Venus and Mars when it comes to making something go forward. Still, in the case of focus, I think Saturn's your first choice because you have to contract your energy. and then maybe add in a little extra supporting spice from Mars or Venus, depending on your personal proclivities and the nature of what you're trying to focus on. So, the desire for more focus in your life comes down to establishing a better relationship with Saturn. And it also comes from an awareness of what focus is. It is a limited resource. There's only so much time every day you can focus, and then your clock gets reset. And so you have to build that awareness into how you end up working. I think I produce more content than just about anybody else I know. Over the last 3 years, I have put together, I don't even know how many hours of content now. The Coven space has 75 plus hours of lectures, plus another 30 some odd hours of ceremonies. And that doesn't even count the weekly, monthly disposable stuff like forecasts and things that, you do when they're gone. Things like this that you do when they're kind of gone. Plus another 4 12 to 16 week courses, all in 3 years, and all the things that are attached to that. So I am constantly creating new stuff over and over again. And so you have to, when you're in that state of mind, if you're a content creator and you're doing it professionally, whether you're writing a book or you're creating courses or whatever you're doing, you have no choice but to learn how to hoard your precious resource of focus. And maybe you get 2 or 3 or 4 hours a day of deep work. And if you don't relax, you're not going to be able to contract the next day. It's kind of like, we put shock absorbers on cars so that while they're driving, you don't have to feel all the bumps on the road. But a shock absorber contracts a little bit to protect you from that bump. But eventually you go over too many bumps and they don't contract anymore. If they don't contract anymore, everything's like, so you have to learn how to work with what you have. And that's, again, part of establishing a better relationship with Saturn. He teaches you about focus, but he also teaches you how to work within limits. And so you have to deal with both of them. Now, just like when we were talking about discernment, and discernment is governed by the sun, and its opposite is Saturn, because the sun rules Leo and Saturn rules Aquarius in traditional astrology. There's a natural opposition there between discernment, and you make a choice and you pick one side or the other, and you have to say no to the one you don't pick, and so it's like a limitation. Well, the other opposite of Mars is the moon, because, Cancer, Capricorn. So where Mars pulls our attention in to contract, Moon is really the opposite point of relaxing. So if you want to keep contracting, you have to learn how to relax, or you can't maintain a system that works optimally. So another thing to consider, you can't keep focused all the time. It is not possible. It's not biologically possible. So you can increase your focus to a point, but after that, you have to be able to bring on the other planets to persevere with that balance. Okay, so if we're going to do a spell for focus, we have the same choices that we did when we did the spell for discernment. You can either do something that's teaching you a habit over time, like setting up an altar where you come back to on a daily basis or a weekly basis to reflect on what it means to focus. Or you could have something in your physical environment, maybe where you need to focus, like maybe you need to focus enough to write a book, maybe something right near your computer where you're writing your book, or something that you can wear and work with like a talisman for establishing a better relationship with Saturn 24/7. Any of these can work. It just kind of depends on what kind of focus you need and for what. Focus is used in so many areas of our life, and You know, we focus because we want to build something. We focus because, you know, we have a project we need. We focus because we're learning how to do Tai Chi. We're all those are possible. So we're working with Saturn. Saturn loves things that are dark. He's the dimmest and slowest moving of all the planets. So you could build an altar out of dark colored metals, dark colored things. A picture of Saturn might be epic. Maybe as a screensaver, you could put a Saturn screensaver on all your devices where you're actually doing your work. Now, my favorite is that backlit one where the sun is behind Saturn and he's lit up and all glowy. Might be a great thing if that's where the focus is required. I haven't had a chance to talk to Anita about this, so we'll try to get her today, and maybe I can dial it in a little bit more about exactly what she's trying to focus about. When I say dark things, black is a possibility. So maybe you could find like obsidian or jet. These can be great little tools for focus. Wands and eggs and things that concentrate energy are one possibility. These also happen to be really grounding to keep you from flights of fantasy up there. So that is one possibility. There's a little holder for this that has Bast the cat all around it, so I I can put that up on my desk. You could get something that's dark purple. Here's a little dark purple. So that could be another thing that you could have on for Saturn if you need that kind of touchstone. A ring that has a black stone in it might be something that reminds you of that Saturn energy. There's a company that makes these. I don't know if I can get it off. These bead bracelets, but what makes them cool is that they have this container on them. And the container, it functions as like the holder, but you can wrap up a piece of paper and stick it in the container. So if there's something that you need to focus on, like writing a book, you could get one of these with black or dark purple or even this dark blue. This is lapis, so it's more for. It has some Jupiter overtones in it too, and you can put the name of what you want to focus on in the little holder, and then you kind of have dual purpose thing. I am focusing. And I'm focusing on this thing. Here's one that brings in a little bit of, there's more lapis, brings in a little bit of Saturn for the circle at the bottom and the sun for the one top of it. So this could be like focus under spirit. So discernment, focus, all in one little piece of jewelry. All right? So many, many possibilities as you are working with this, all right? There's all kinds of gods and goddesses that are related to the Saturn vibe. Anything that is grounded and earthy that connects us to nature can be Saturn related. The Greek god Pan was like loved Saturn, had a great connection with Capricorn. Witches are even a sort of talisman of focus in the sense that they reflect a female side of Saturn. But you've got many possibilities there. Any pantheon that you're working with, just find the gods who bring our energy down. Saturn is also a god of death and endings. That endings represent the limitations. So any god of death and endings can also kind of double in for that kind of energy. So as we work on the spell tomorrow, we're going to come up with what some of these possibilities might look like. I will see if I can get a hold of Anita, or if anybody else wants to chime in. If I can't get a hold of her, what in specific you would like to use for a spell of focus. We can also bring in herbs that are related to Saturn. They're anything with black seeds or anything that's slightly poisonous or really poisonous. We could bring in, we already talked about the stones. Animals or things that have black feathers or black fur. That can be, carrion birds, crows and ravens, black cats. All of those things can be related to focus. So this is a great time of year to get ingredients for focus spells because, all of those black cats, black birds, they're all over the Halloween store decoration section. And you can just pull one out and bring it home for not a lot of money. Especially once they go on sale after the holidays. So lots of choices here. Something to think about as you're putting together your focus spells. If you've got any questions about this process, please put them in the little section underneath, the comment section. Another thing to remember, if it's Saturn, you automatically know the best times to work on this would probably be a Saturday for Saturn day. There are Saturn hours in every day of the week. Saturn likes nighttime hours because he's a planet of the dark. But don't ignore daytime hours because the challenge with Saturn is he's dark and cold. And so when you're working with Saturn, if you're doing it at night, yeah, he likes dark and cold, but it can get him a little too morose and heavy. So if it feels too heavy, that's why when you're working with Saturn and Mars, you have to they're a little more challenging to learn how to master because they can go overboard more quickly than some of the other planets can. So a Saturn morning right after the sun rises can be on Saturday can be a good time to work with Saturn because the heat of the day helps warm him up a little bit and he's a little more friendly and amenable to work with. So you got choices. Got choices there. All right. So have people said things? Let's say. Oh, Diana's here. Yay. Hi, Diana. Saturn, we're already developing on our relationship. I love that image of Saturn you were talking about. Jackie says, I've got the perfect Saturn bracelet that I made, but no sun ones yet. Typical of me. Diana says, I have lovely Belladonna perfume for Saturnine work. Yes, Belladonna is on that list. So is Nightshade and Wolfsbane and all those things that they mentioned in Harry Potter. Wolfsbane, Aconite, Mandrake, things along that line. Don't eat them, though. Pat says, I like focus to learn and maintain a new habit over time. There you go. So we have lots of options. I'll get with Anita and see what she wants her focus for. Until then, I hope this talk awakens your concept of what's possible, gets your creative juices flowing, and we will finish going through walking through the elements of a spell for focus in tomorrow's session. Okay? Until then, we look forward to talking to you soon. Have a very magical day. Bye, everyone.